Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another exciting episode of our podcast. I'm Agnes, and today we have a very special topic lined up for all of you who are learning English. But before we dive in, let me first introduce my wonderful co-host, Jesper. How are you today?
Hi, Agnes. I'm doing really well, thanks. And hello to all our listeners out there. We're so glad you're joining us again. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation because it's something that I think many of us can relate to. I think it's going to be both fun and incredibly useful. Agnes, can you tell us what we're talking about today?
Absolutely. So today, we're talking about one of the most engaging, enjoyable, and surprisingly effective ways to learn English through TV shows. That's right. Using TV shows as a tool to improve your language skills. I mean, think about it, how many of us have binge-watched our favorite series and picked up new words or phrases without even realizing it?
Yes, exactly. Learning English through TV shows is not only fun, but also an excellent way to immerse yourself in the language. You're exposed to different accents, everyday vocabulary, real-life conversations, and even cultural references that textbooks often miss. And the best part, you're learning without it feeling like study time.
That's so true, Jasper. And what I love about this method is that it's so versatile. You can choose shows based on your interests, and that makes it so much more enjoyable. Whether you're into crime dramas, comedies, or documentaries, there's something for everyone. And it doesn't feel like a traditional lesson. It feels more natural, which is key when it comes to learning a language like English. But before we get too deep into it, let's start by explaining why this method works so well. Jasper, what do you think makes TV shows such a powerful tool for learning English?
That's a great question, Agnes. I think one of the main reasons is context. In TV shows, the language is used in real-life situations. You're not just reading a sentence in a textbook that says, "I'd like to order a coffee." Instead, you might watch a scene where someone walks into a cafe, orders coffee, talks to the barista, and even makes small talk with a friend while they wait. You're seeing the whole interaction, and that helps you understand how language works in different scenarios.
Yes, exactly. TV shows offer that full range of communication, body language, tone of voice, facial expressions, things that are difficult to capture in written texts alone. You see how people express emotions, how they react in conversations, and even how humor works in English, which can be tricky to grasp otherwise.
That's another great point. Agnes, humor is such a big part of English, especially in TV shows. It's not always about the words themselves. Sometimes it's about the way something is said, the timing, or the cultural reference. By watching TV shows, you not only expand your vocabulary, but also get a deeper understanding of the nuances of the language. And here's another advantage: TV shows often use conversational English, the kind of language you'll hear in everyday life, not the formal or academic English you might find in a textbook. So, if your goal is to sound more natural when speaking English, watching shows can really help with that.
Yes, conversational English is key. Many of us learn formal English in school, but when it comes to speaking in real life, especially with native speakers, it's often more casual and relaxed. And TV shows give you a perfect window into that. You'll hear slang, idioms, and expressions that people use every day, but that you might not come across in traditional lessons. Plus, you can focus on different aspects of the language depending on the type of show you're watching. For example, if you're watching a medical drama, you'll hear specific terminology related to healthcare. If you're watching a comedy, you'll pick up on jokes, puns, and lighthearted banter. It's like getting a mini lesson in every episode.
Exactly. And the great thing is, you can tailor your watching experience based on your level. If you're more advanced, you might watch something fast-paced with complex dialogue, like a political drama. If you're still working on building your vocabulary, maybe a sitcom with simpler language would be better. The choice is totally up to you. So, Agnes, for our listeners who want to get started with this method, what are some practical tips for learning English through TV shows? How can they make the most out of it?
Great question, Jasper. I'd say one of the first tips is to choose the right show. Pick something that interests you and matches your current level. If you're just starting out with this method, don't pick a show that's too complicated or full of jargon. Start with something light, like a sitcom or a family drama, where the language is more straightforward. Another tip is to use subtitles. If you're not quite catching everything, that's okay. Start with English subtitles. This way, you can follow along with what the characters are saying, and you'll start connecting the spoken words to their written form. Over time, you can challenge yourself by turning off the subtitles and just listening to the dialogue.
That's such good advice. Subtitles are an amazing tool for learners. And for those who feel more confident, they could even try watching with no subtitles at all, or maybe switch to subtitles in their native language at first and then gradually move to English. It's all about finding what works best for you. Another practical tip is to pause and repeat. Don't be afraid to stop the show and replay certain scenes or phrases. If there's a word or expression you didn't quite catch, rewind and listen to it again. You can even try repeating the line out loud to practice your pronunciation. It's like having a personal language coach in your living room.
Yes, repetition is so helpful, and it's even better if you can try to mimic the way the characters speak, their tone, rhythm, and pronunciation. This is something called shadowing, where you basically copy what the characters are saying in real time. It helps with speaking fluency and makes you more comfortable with the natural flow of English. And speaking of pronunciation, TV shows expose you to different accents, which is another big advantage. You'll hear British English, American English, Australian accents, and many more, depending on what you watch. It helps you train your ear to understand different varieties of English.
That's a really good point. Accents can be tough, especially if you're only used to one type of English. But by watching shows from different countries, you get a broader understanding of how English sounds around the world. And the more exposure you get, the easier it becomes to understand different accents in real life. Another thing I'd add is to take notes. While watching, if you come across new words, phrases, or idioms, write them down. Later, you can look them up, study them, and try to use them in your own conversations. This way, you're not just passively watching, you're actively learning and building your vocabulary.
Yes, taking notes is such a simple but effective way to track your progress. You can also create flashcards or use apps like Quizlet to review the new words you've learned. And remember, don't just focus on individual words, pay attention to how they're used in context, in full sentences. That's how you'll start to understand the subtleties of English. Also, something I recommend is watching episodes more than once. The first time, you might just enjoy the story. The second time, you can focus more on the language, listening for expressions or idioms you might have missed. Each time you watch, you're reinforcing your understanding of the language.
Yes, I agree. Rewatching episodes is a great way to reinforce what you've learned. And since you already know the plot, you can focus more on the language during your second or third viewing. And Agnes, what do you think about trying to speak along with the characters as a way to practice? Like, if someone's watching a show, could they try to play one of the characters' roles for a few lines?
Oh, I love that idea, Jasper. That's such a fun way to practice. You can pretend you're in the scene with the characters, speaking their lines as if you're one of them. It's a great way to work on your speaking skills and to get comfortable with using English in a more conversational way. Plus, it adds a bit of creativity to your learning routine, which can keep things interesting.
Exactly. And it's all about making learning enjoyable. right? That's why I think this method works so well you're learning without it feeling like a chore. You're enjoying the show, but at the same time, you're picking up new vocabulary, improving your listening skills, and even practicing your speaking. It's like learning by osmosis.
Absolutely. When you're having fun, you're more motivated to keep going, and before you know it, you'll have improved without even realizing it. TV shows are such a natural and engaging way to learn English, and the best part is, it doesn't matter if you're just starting out or if you're at an advanced level, there's always something new to learn.
Yes, learning through TV shows is a lifelong journey. Even as an advanced learner, there are always new expressions or cultural references to discover. And the more you watch, the more confident you'll become in understanding spoken English and using it in your own conversations.
Exactly, Jasper. Confidence is key, and the more you immerse yourself in English through TV shows, the more natural it feels to use the language in real-life conversations. Now, since we're already talking about how much TV shows can help, let's dive a bit deeper into how you can actively engage with them to maximize your learning experience. For example, one thing I've found really useful is focusing on specific scenes. Pick a short clip from a show and break it down. Watch it a couple of times, pay attention to the words they use, the emotions behind those words, and even the gestures. What's so great about this is that you get a feel for how conversations actually flow in English.
Oh, I love that idea. Focusing on short clips makes the task less overwhelming, especially if you're tackling a show that has fast-paced dialogue or heavy accents. Breaking it down into bite-sized pieces really helps. And it's even better if you can find scenes with everyday situations, like ordering food at a restaurant or chatting with a friend.
Exactly. Everyday situations are the best for learning practical language. And after you've watched the clip a couple of times, try imitating what the characters are saying. Mimicking their intonation and rhythm can help improve your fluency. You can pause after a line, repeat it, and try to match their tone and accent as closely as possible. It's almost like you're becoming part of the show.
That's a great technique, Agnes. It's like you're practicing in real time, but without the pressure of an actual conversation. Plus, it helps with pronunciation. You're hearing how native speakers form words, where they stress certain syllables, and how their sentences rise and fall. And when you speak English later on, you'll naturally start to sound more like a native speaker.
Right? And it's not just about sounding like a native speaker, it's about feeling comfortable with the flow of the language. English, especially in TV shows, has a certain rhythm to it, and picking up on that rhythm will make you more confident when you speak. Another thing I would suggest is actively writing down new vocabulary or phrases you hear while watching. This is a really effective way to build up your word bank. But don't just write down the words, also write the context in which they were used. For example, if a character says, "I'm totally swamped," note down that it means they're really busy. This will help you remember how to use the phrase correctly.
Yes, and the context is so important. Words and phrases don't always mean the same thing in every situation. So when you hear them used in a particular way, you understand their meaning more deeply. And when you go back to review your notes, you can recall the scene where you heard it and how it was used, making it easier to remember. Also, one thing to remember is that it's okay to watch the same show more than once. The first time, you're probably just following the plot, but the second or third time, you can focus on picking up more language details, phrases, expressions, even the way characters interact with each other.
Exactly. Repetition is your friend. You'll be surprised at how much more you notice the second or third time around. Plus, because you already know what's going to happen in the story, you can focus all your attention on the language. And speaking of repetition, let's not forget how helpful subtitles can be. Watching a show with English subtitles can make a big difference, especially if you're still working on listening comprehension. It allows you to match the words you hear with their written form, which is really helpful for learning new vocabulary and phrases.
Oh, absolutely. Subtitles are a fantastic tool. And once you feel confident, you can challenge yourself by turning off the subtitles to see how much you can understand just by listening. It's a great way to test your progress and push yourself to improve. Another thing I'd suggest is choosing a variety of shows to keep things interesting. Watching the same genre can get repetitive, so switch it up. Maybe one week you watch a comedy, and the next week you try a drama or a documentary. Each genre gives you exposure to different types of language slang, formal speech, technical terms. It's all valuable.
That's a great point, Jasper. Variety is key. By watching different genres, you not only keep things interesting, but also expand your understanding of English in various contexts. And the more diverse your viewing habits, the more versatile your language skills will become. For instance, a sitcom might help you with everyday casual conversation, while a drama might introduce you to more complex emotions and interactions.
And if I could add, don't forget about cultural context. TV shows often reflect the culture of the country they're made in, so you're also learning about the customs, values, and social norms of English-speaking countries. That's a huge bonus because understanding the culture behind the language can really help you connect with people on a deeper level when you're speaking English.
Exactly. Culture and language go hand in hand. When you understand the cultural references in a show, it helps you grasp the humor, the social cues, and even the subtleties of communication that go beyond words. It's like you're not just learning English, you're learning how to live and interact in an English-speaking world. And one last tip before we move on to the next part of our conversation, don't be afraid to pause and rewind. If there's a part of the dialogue you didn't catch or a phrase you didn't understand, go back and listen again. Repetition helps reinforce your learning, and it's okay to take things at your own pace.
Absolutely. There's no rush. Learning through TV shows should feel enjoyable, not stressful. It's all about taking your time, learning at your own pace, and most importantly, having fun while you're doing it.
Exactly, Jasper. Learning at your own pace is so important, and when you're having fun, it really doesn't feel like learning at all, right? That's the beauty of using TV shows to learn English. You're entertained, but at the same time, you're picking up new words, phrases, and cultural context without even realizing it. And I think one of the most important things to highlight is consistency. Watching just 10 to 15 minutes of an English show each day can have a huge impact over time. It's like forming a habit. The more you expose yourself to the language regularly, the faster you'll start to notice progress. Even if you don't understand every word or phrase at first, the repetition of hearing certain terms and expressions will start to sink in.
That's a great point, Agnes. Consistency is key. A lot of people feel like they need to set aside an hour or more every day to study, but even just a few minutes can make a big difference when it's done regularly. And it's less intimidating that way. You don't have to block out a huge chunk of time, just fit it into your daily routine. Maybe while you're having breakfast, or even right before bed.
Absolutely. And something else that's fun and effective is keeping a vocabulary journal. While watching your favorite show, have a notebook nearby where you can jot down new words or phrases you hear. But don't just write them down, try to use them in your own sentences afterward. This helps you practice actively instead of just passively absorbing information. And if you're really committed, you can even challenge yourself to speak like your favorite character. Try to mimic how they talk, their phrases, their tone, or their expressions. It's a playful way to practice your speaking skills and improve your pronunciation. Plus, you can pick up some pretty cool expressions along the way.
Haha, yes, I love that. It makes learning fun and engaging, and you might even surprise yourself with how much you start to sound like those characters after a while. And speaking of sounding like characters, focusing on intonation is something learners often overlook, but is so crucial. It's not just about what you say, but how you say it. TV shows are full of natural examples of how English speakers emphasize different words or phrases to change the meaning of a sentence.
Exactly. Intonation really makes a difference. For example, the way someone says, "Really?" can either sound like they're genuinely surprised or like they're sarcastically doubting something. And watching TV shows helps you pick up on those subtle differences in tone, which is hard to learn from textbooks alone. It adds that layer of emotion and personality to the language, making you sound more natural when you speak. Another thing I'd recommend is to watch with a friend, if possible. When you watch with someone else, especially someone who's also learning English, you can pause and discuss what's happening. You can ask each other questions, talk about new phrases, or even act out scenes together. It's a great way to reinforce your learning while having fun.
Oh, I love that idea. Watching with a friend or even in a group creates more opportunities for conversation. You can discuss what you've learned and challenge each other to use new vocabulary in your own discussions. Plus, it keeps you motivated. You're more likely to keep up the habit when you're sharing it with someone else. Another tip that I think is super helpful is to choose shows with subtitles in English, even if you're confident in your listening skills. Reading the words as you hear them helps to reinforce the language in your mind. It's like a double-layered learning experience, both visual and auditory. And once you feel comfortable, you can try turning off the subtitles to really test your understanding.
Yes, subtitles can be such a game changer. They give you a visual reference for the words you're hearing, which is especially helpful for tricky or fast-paced dialogue. And like you said, when you're ready to challenge yourself, turning them off is a great way to measure how far you've come. But even with subtitles, it's important to actively listen to the dialogue. Don't just rely on reading, try to focus on how the words are spoken, the pronunciation, and the context in which they're used.
Exactly. It's all about balance. Sometimes, subtitles are there as a support, but your ears should be doing most of the work. And speaking of challenging yourself, you can also try watching shows that have different accents. Maybe you start with American English, and then try something in British English or Australian English. Each region has its own unique way of speaking, and exposing yourself to different accents helps you become a more versatile listener.
That's such a good point. English is spoken with so many different accents around the world, and learning to understand them broadens your listening skills. Plus, it's really fun to pick up on the subtle differences in vocabulary and pronunciation between, say, American and British English. Like when an American says apartment, a British speaker might say flat, or elevator versus lift. Little differences like that make learning English even more interesting. Another tip I have is to watch shows that you enjoy. It's easier to stay motivated when you're genuinely interested in the content. So, whether it's comedy, drama, or even documentaries, find something that keeps you hooked. The more you enjoy it, the more likely you are to keep coming back to it. And the more you come back, the more English you'll learn without even thinking about it.
Absolutely, Agnes. Passion is such a powerful motivator. If you're excited about what you're watching, the learning happens almost automatically. It doesn't feel like work, and before you know it, you've picked up tons of new words, phrases, and even cultural insights. And speaking of passion, I think the most important takeaway from this discussion is that learning English doesn't have to be a chore. By using TV shows, you can turn something that's typically seen as a passive activity, watching TV, into an active and engaging learning experience.
Yes, exactly. It's all about making learning feel natural and enjoyable. TV shows are such an accessible resource, and they're packed with language in its most authentic form. So, whether you're practicing listening skills, expanding your vocabulary, or improving your pronunciation, TV shows are a fantastic way to learn. And as you continue your journey of learning English through TV shows, just remember to take your time, have fun with it, and be consistent. Bit by bit, you'll see improvement. It's a process, and every step you take gets you closer to your goal.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Agnes. It's been such a great discussion, and I hope all our listeners feel inspired to start learning English through TV shows. There's no better way to immerse yourself in the language while enjoying some quality entertainment.
Absolutely. And as we always say, learning English is not just about studying, it's about living the language. So, find a show you love, dive in, and enjoy the process. We wish you the best of luck on your language learning journey.
Best of luck, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Keep practicing, keep learning, and remember English is a journey, not a destination. We'll see you next time.
Take care, everyone, and happy learning.
Goodbye, everyone.